You know those moments where you think, wow, everything's finally falling into place? That was me about 2 years ago. I had just landed a new job in Dallas at a mid-sized marketing firm, the kind of place where everyone wears business casual. The coffee machine is always out of creamer, and the walls are plastered with motivational posters about teamwork and innovation. I'd been stuck at my old job for too long, buried under piles of boring data entry. So when this opportunity came along, I thought, yes, fresh start, new people, maybe even some actual career growth. On my first day, I walked in wearing my best navy blazer, clutching my tote bag like it was a lifeline. The receptionist, a cheerful woman named Carla, gave me a visitor badge and a tour, and that's when I met him. Jake. Tall, sandy brown hair, charming smile. The kind of guy who seems like he was born to be in a LinkedIn profile picture. He was standing near the coffee station joking with a group of coworkers. Carla introduced me, and he flashed this perfect, easy smile. "Welcome aboard," he said. "We don't bite much." I laughed. A little too hard, if I'm honest. The thing about Jake was, he had that effortless charisma. The way he shook your hand, looked you in the eye, made you feel like the only person in the room. The next week, Jake started dropping by my desk just to check in. He'd ask how I was settling in, offer to help me with the company's internal systems, even bring me coffee once or twice. At lunch, he'd pull up a chair and introduce me. To other people, everyone seemed to like him. And I'll admit, I did too. By the end of my second week, we were already swapping memes over Slack during boring meetings. He'd roll his eyes at certain managers, making me stifle a laugh. I felt included, like I'd found a work friend I could trust. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of back-to-back client calls, Jake popped his head over my cubicle wall. "Hey," he said. "A few of us are grabbing drinks at McCoy's after work. You in?" McCoy's was a local bar a few blocks away, the kind of place with neon beer signs and fried pickles on the menu. I hesitated for half a second. I didn't want to be the new girl who doesn't socialize, so I said yes. When we got there, I found myself squeezed into a booth between Jake and a woman from accounting named Denise. The group ordered pitchers of beer and baskets of fries. Jake kept the conversation flowing, telling funny stories about bizarre client requests and his worst marketing campaigns. Every so often, his arm would brush mine, not in a creepy way, or at least not obviously. It just happened when Denise left to take a call. Jake leaned closer. "You're fitting in here way faster than I did," he said. "Took me months to get anyone to talk to me." I smiled. "Guess I have a good mentor." He grinned. "Guess you do." That was the first night I noticed the way his eyes lingered a second longer than necessary. Over the next few weeks, we started spending more time together. Not just at work, but outside of it. He'd text me funny memes at night, invite me to grab lunch from the taco truck down the street. Once, he even offered to drive me home when my car wouldn't start at work. We became a bit of a duo. If someone couldn't find me, they'd ask Jake. If Jake was in a meeting, he'd tell people, "Run it by her. She's got great ideas." One Friday afternoon, as everyone was packing up, Jake walked by my desk and said, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" "Probably just Netflix," I said. He smirked. "Come out with me instead. There's this new rooftop bar I've been wanting to check out." I don't know if it was the exhaustion from the week or the thrill of the invite, but I said yes without overthinking. That night, we sat under strings of fairy lights, sipping cocktails and laughing about work drama. He told me about growing up in Oklahoma, moving to Dallas for bigger opportunities, and how he wanted to eventually run his own marketing agency. And somewhere between the second drink and the skyline view, I realized this was a date. For the next month, things got personal. We weren't just coworkers anymore. We were something else. We'd have lunch together almost every day, sometimes slipping away for coffee breaks, just the two of us. He'd text me late at night, and I'd smile at my phone like a teenager. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags, like how he avoided holding my hand when we bumped into coworkers outside of work, or how he'd sometimes get vague about his plans on weekends. But back then, I was too busy enjoying the attention. One Tuesday afternoon, I was in the break room pouring coffee when I overheard Jake talking to someone in the hallway. He was laughing. That same charming laugh that had pulled me in weeks earlier. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. Yeah, she's cute. I'm just keeping it casual. You know how it is. I froze, coffee pot in hand. Was he talking about me? Before I could figure it out, he walked into the break room, saw me, and smiled like nothing was wrong. Hey, he said. Big meeting later. You ready? I forced a smile back. Yeah, ready. But inside, something shifted. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe he wasn't talking about me. But deep down, I knew. And that's when I started paying closer attention. A week later, the company had its fall happy hour at a downtown lounge. Everyone was there. Managers, interns, the whole crew. I wore a black dress and tried to focus on mingling. About an hour in, I went to grab another drink. And that's when I saw him. Jake. Standing in the corner, laughing, with his arm around a brunette I'd never seen before. She wasn't just a coworker. I could tell by the way he touched her. Familiar, confident. When he noticed me watching, his smile faltered, but only for a second. Then he went right back to his conversation. I don't even remember the rest of that night. But the next morning, sitting at my desk, I felt something harden inside me. Whatever this thing with Jake had been, it was over. Still, I had no idea then just how messy things were about to get. Because Jake, he wasn't done with me yet, and he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. When I woke up that Monday morning, I already knew something had changed. The excitement I used to feel about seeing Jake at work, gone. That little flutter in my stomach when I saw his name pop up on Slack, gone. Now every interaction felt different. And maybe it was stupid, but I didn't confront him right away. Part of me hoped I was wrong. That maybe that brunette at the happy hour was just an old friend, a cousin, something. But the way he acted over the next few days told me everything I needed to know. At first, he kept things normal. We'd talk about projects, share inside jokes, but the texts after work, they slowed down. The lunch invites, less frequent. Then Friday rolled around. I was sitting at my desk around 4:30, trying to finish up a client report, when Jake strolled over, hands in his pockets. That casual, confident look he always had. Hey, he said, leaning against my desk. You doing anything tonight? I didn't even look up from my computer. Why? He hesitated, just for a split second. Some of us are going to McCoy's. Thought you might want to come. I finally met his eyes. Who's us? He smirked. Just a few people from work and a friend. There it was, a friend. And I knew exactly who he meant, so I said, no thanks, I've got plans. He raised an eyebrow, like he was surprised. I'd turned him down. Cool, see you Monday then. And with that, he walked away. That weekend, I decided to rip the Band-Aid off. I texted him, we need to talk. He replied instantly, about what? About us. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Look, he started. I think we've both been having fun, but I'm not looking for anything serious right now. I let out a humorless laugh. Right. You mean because you're already seeing someone else? Silence. Then, I don't think we need to make this weird. Weird, that's what he called it. By Monday, we were officially just coworkers, except that's not what it felt like. Because over the next couple weeks, something started to happen. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. The small talk in the break room? Gone. The friendly nods from other teams? Fewer and fewer. One morning, I walked into the office kitchen to grab a coffee, and 2 people stopped talking the second they saw me. They gave me that polite, forced smile and walked out. Then, during a team meeting, I noticed Jake sitting across the table from me. He looked very comfortable, cracking jokes with our manager, getting nods of approval, and then our manager made a comment about maintaining professionalism in all interactions. Her eyes flicked toward me. It hit me like a punch to the gut. At lunch that day, Denise, the woman from accounting I'd met my first week, sat down across from me. "Hey," she said cautiously. "I don't know what's going on between you and Jake, but he's been saying some stuff." My stomach tightened. "What kind of stuff?" She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "That you've been distracting him at work. That you've been making things uncomfortable since you two stopped hanging out." I nearly choked on my sandwich. "I make things uncomfortable?" "He's the one," she held up a hand. "I'm just telling you what I heard. Watch your back, okay?" From that moment on, I started noticing the shift everywhere. People who used to ask for my input on projects started going to Jake instead. Team emails would get sent without me CC'd. And Jake? He seemed to be thriving. He'd walk past my desk with that smug little half smile, like he knew exactly what was happening. And then one morning, I found out why. Our manager called me into her office. She closed the door and said HR had received a verbal concern about my behavior. Nothing formal, she assured me, just feedback that maybe you've been a bit too informal with certain coworkers. I stared at her. "You mean Jake?" She didn't confirm, but I could tell from her expression. When I got back to my desk, Jake was there, leaning against it. "Everything okay?" he asked, all fake concern. "Oh, I'm great," I said flatly. "You?" "Never better." He walked away, and I swear I could hear him laughing under his breath. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a breakup. This was war, and Jake was playing dirty. A week later, the company announced that Jake had been promoted to team lead. People clapped, shook his hand, congratulated him. I sat there in stunned silence, because somehow in the middle of throwing me under the bus, he'd managed to climb higher. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. And Jake's little victory? It was going to cost him everything. It was a Tuesday morning in late November. Cold outside, the kind of day where you can see your breath in the parking lot. I'd just sat down at my desk, coffee in hand, ready to tackle my to-do list, when my phone rang. It was an internal call. "Hi, can you come to HR right now?" My stomach dropped. I walked down the hall, every step heavier than the last. Inside the HR office, there were two people waiting for me, Janice, our HR manager, and a guy I didn't recognize from corporate compliance. They both smiled politely, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Thanks for coming in," Janice said. "We just wanted to have a quick conversation about some concerns that have been raised." Concerns. Such a vague little word for something that could ruin your entire career. The compliance guy opened a folder. "We've received a formal complaint from a colleague regarding inappropriate behavior and a hostile work environment." I blinked at them. "From who?" Janice glanced at the paper. "We can't disclose the name for confidentiality reasons, but I didn't need them to. I already knew." Jake. Apparently, according to the complaint, I'd been persistently engaging with this colleague in ways that made him feel uncomfortable and unable to perform his duties effectively. It also claimed I'd been undermining his professional credibility and spreading unsubstantiated rumors. I almost laughed out loud. The irony was unbelievable. I told them point blank, "This is retaliation." He and I had a brief personal relationship that ended, and since then he's been spreading lies about me. Janice kept that careful HR expression, sympathetic but non-committal. "Well, we just want to make sure everyone feels safe and respected here." The compliance guy slid a paper toward me. "This is just an acknowledgement form. It confirms that we've discussed the concern with you." I didn't want to sign it, but refusing would only make me look guilty. So I signed. And the second I walked out of that room, I knew my days at that company were numbered. From that point on, everything I did was under a microscope. If I took a 5-minute break, someone noticed. If I sent an email that was too blunt, it got flagged. If I avoided Jake entirely, I was being uncooperative. It was exhausting. And the worst part? Jake was thriving. He'd been in his new team lead role for less than a month, but he was already strutting around the office like he owned the place. One afternoon, I overheard him in the hallway, bragging to someone about finally clearing out the dead weight from the team. I knew he meant me. The breaking point came a week later. I was called into another HR meeting. This time, they recommended that I take some time off while they investigated further. I asked how long. They said they couldn't say, which is corporate speak for, "We're trying to push you out." That night, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared at my laptop. I pulled up my resume, updated my LinkedIn, and started applying for jobs. I wasn't going to give Jake the satisfaction of seeing me get dragged out. If I was leaving, it would be on my terms. A week later, I handed in my resignation. Jake didn't even try to hide his satisfaction when he heard. He walked past my desk smirking. "Guess you're moving on to bigger and better things, huh?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Oh, you have no idea." Because in that moment, something clicked. I didn't just want to move on. I wanted revenge. Real revenge. And I was going to make sure Jake regretted every single thing he'd done to me. The last week had been brutal. Smiles from people I'd once eaten lunch with, whispers in the break room when I walked in, Jake acting like the king of the castle, strutting past my desk with that smug little half smile. I'd cleared out my cubicle in silence, avoiding eye contact with him. When I finally shut down my computer and turned in my badge, the receptionist, Carla, the one who'd greeted me my first day, leaned in and whispered, "Keep your chin up. He's not as untouchable as he thinks." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She glanced toward the hall where Jake was laughing with a couple of managers. "Just, let's say some people are starting to notice things. You didn't hear it from me." And just like that, a little spark lit inside me. After work, a few coworkers invited me for a goodbye drink at McCoy's. I almost said no, but something told me to go. It was there, over a basket of fried pickles and my second gin and tonic, that I got my first real piece of intel. Denise, the same woman who'd warned me about Jake's gossip before, leaned across the table. "Listen," she said, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I know you're leaving anyway. There's talk going around that Jake's been billing clients for hours he didn't actually work." I stared at her. "Like, padding his timesheets?" "Worse," she said. "Double billing. He's been logging the same hours on multiple client accounts. That's a big no-no in finance." For a moment, I just sat there, letting the information sink in. Double billing wasn't just shady. It was the kind of thing that could kill a client relationship. And in the US marketing world, clients were everything. Denise shrugged. "Honestly, I don't know how he's getting away with it. Maybe because the clients love him, or maybe..." She lowered her voice. "Maybe management just doesn't want to rock the boat while he's bringing in revenue." I took a slow sip of my drink. I wasn't in the company anymore. I didn't have to play nice. When I got home that night, I opened my laptop and logged into my work email one last time. Yes, technically my access was supposed to be cut off. But somehow someone in IT hadn't hit the switch yet, and in my inbox, there it was. A shared folder Jake had once given me access to when we worked on a project together. Curious, I clicked through. Inside were dozens of invoices, time logs, and client reports. And the more I looked, the more things didn't add up. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I downloaded every single file. The next morning, I woke up with that familiar post-job loss fog. Part of me wanted to just move on, update my LinkedIn, start job hunting, and forget Jake ever existed. But every time I thought about how he'd smiled when I turned in my resignation, that spark inside me grew hotter. He'd wanted to ruin me. Instead, he'd handed me the ammunition to ruin him. A few days later, I met up with Carla for coffee. She was still working at the firm, and she filled me in on the latest. "Jake's already making changes," she said. "Reassigning projects, cutting hours for some of the junior staff. People are nervous." I asked if anyone else had noticed his billing habits. She smirked. "Oh, people have noticed. But they're scared to speak up. You know how it is. Whistleblowers don't exactly get rewarded." That's when it clicked. I didn't have to be a whistleblower inside the company. I could be an anonymous source from the outside. That weekend, I started organizing the files I'd downloaded. I created a spreadsheet: dates, clients, hours, build, project codes. The patterns were clear. Jake was billing multiple clients for the exact same hours, sometimes even for work he hadn't touched in weeks. It was meticulous, almost arrogant. And in the US, where client trust is everything, this was the kind of thing that could sink a career fast. The more I worked, the more I realized this wasn't going to be a quick hit. If I wanted Jake to go down, I needed to be smart. Couldn't just send an angry email to HR and hope for the best. That would be traced back to me in minutes. No. I needed to wait for the perfect moment, when his fall would be the most public, the most humiliating. And I had a feeling that moment was coming. On my last day of company email access, I found a little gem in my inbox, an all-hands meeting invite for next month. The subject line? Team celebration and promotion announcement. And guess whose name was in the agenda notes? Jake's. He wasn't just a team lead anymore. He was about to be promoted again. I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair, smiling for the first time in weeks. Jake had spent months tearing me down, making me the villain in his little story. But he'd forgotten one thing. I knew where all his skeletons were buried. The files I'd pulled before my email access shut down were good, but I knew they weren't enough. Sure, the double billing was damning, but if I wanted to bury Jake completely, I needed more than numbers on a spreadsheet. I needed context, proof of intent. Something that would leave no room for, oh, that was just a clerical mistake. So I started reaching out to the people I trusted, quietly. First was Denise. I texted her. Got a minute to chat? Just between us? We met for lunch at a diner off 135, the kind of place where nobody knows your name and the coffee is always lukewarm. She slid into the booth and leaned in. Okay, spill. I told her I'd been keeping track of Jake's shady billing. At first, she just stared at me. Then she whispered, "You know, I've seen him copy-paste the same project status into different client reports. Just changes the name and date." Over the next week, I got more stories. A junior copywriter told me Jake had once claimed her campaign pitch as his own during a client meeting. Another coworker mentioned seeing him accidentally bill a client for ad work that had been canceled. Every detail went into my growing file. I also started digging into his online presence. Jake loved attention. His LinkedIn was practically a shrine to himself. Endless posts about leadership, integrity, and bringing value to clients. Photos of him at networking events, shaking hands with local business leaders. And then I hit gold, one post from a month ago, bragging about a huge win for a client campaign. Except, I recognized that campaign. It wasn't his. It had been Denise's project. And she told me the client had actually ended the contract early because of poor performance. Now I had a pattern. Jake wasn't just a bad coworker. He was a liar, and he'd built his reputation on other people's work. The problem was, I still needed hard evidence from inside the company. That's when I remembered something. My old key card. When I quit, I'd turned in my official badge, the one with my picture on it. But months earlier, when our office upgraded security, IT had accidentally issued me a duplicate card without photo ID. I'd tossed it into my desk drawer at home and forgotten about it. I pulled it out that night and just stared at it. If the system hadn't flagged it as inactive yet, I might still be able to get inside. I didn't rush it. If I was going back in, it had to be at the right time, when the office was empty, but I wouldn't draw attention from cleaning crews or security. So I waited. A week later, Denise texted, "Me, FYI, the whole office is at an off-site training tomorrow. Building's practically empty except for a skeleton crew." Perfect. The next day, I dressed like any other downtown Dallas professional. Black slacks, blazer, tote bag over my shoulder. I walked into the lobby like I still belonged there. The security guard barely looked up. I swiped my old card at the elevator. Green light. My heart was pounding as I stepped onto the familiar carpeted floor. It was eerie, all the desks empty, the hum of the HVAC echoing in the quiet. I went straight to Jake's office. Of course, it was locked. But here's the thing. About offices. People get lazy. Jake had a glass door, and right there on the inside handle was a dangling lanyard with his spare key. I slipped inside and got to work. First, I checked his desktop. Unlocked. Rookie move, emails, client reports, billing logs, and then jackpot. A folder labeled Archives. Inside, dozens of alternate invoices, the kind you make when you need a version for the client and a version for, well, other purposes. One showed the exact same work, billed to 2 different clients, same hours, same description, same dates. I copied everything onto a USB drive I'd brought with me. Then I dug a little deeper. In his sent folder, I found an email chain between him and a vendor. It looked like he'd been inflating vendor costs to clients, then pocketing the difference. This wasn't just shady billing. This was outright fraud. I checked my watch. I'd been in there for almost 40 minutes. Just as I was about to leave, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My pulse spiked. The doorknob rattled. "Jake?" a voice called. It was the security guard. I grabbed my tote, shoved the USB into my pocket, and opened the door like I'd just been passing through. "Oh, hey," I said, smiling. "I was just grabbing a few files for Denise. She's at the offsite." The guard nodded slowly. "Right, just make sure you check out when you leave." "Of course," I said, walking briskly toward the elevators, my heart still racing. When I stepped out into the cool Dallas air, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. I had what I needed, and now. It was just a matter of time. I didn't rush it. That's the thing most people don't understand about revenge. It's not about speed. It's about precision. You don't just swing wildly and hope you land a hit. You line up your shot, wait for your target to walk right into it, and then you pull the trigger. Jake's promotion announcement was coming up at the company's big team celebration and promotion party, the kind where upper management, clients, and even a few board members would be there. The kind where people toast champagne and hand out plaques. It was perfect. Because taking him down in front of his little inner circle wouldn't just bruise his ego, it would crush it. But first, I had to make sure my evidence was airtight. That meant late nights at my kitchen table, my laptop open, coffee cup after coffee cup going cold. I went through every file I'd copied from his computer, every invoice, every report, every shady email. I organized them into folders: double billing, false campaign claims, vendor, cost, fraud, client misrepresentation. For each, I had timelines, client names, email chains, exact dollar amounts. It was the kind of packet that, if it landed in the right hands, would not only get Jake fired, it might get him investigated. Still, I needed more than just data. I needed a delivery method that couldn't be traced back to me. So I bought a brand new laptop, cash, from a big box store 2 towns over. No online order history, no credit. Card trail. From there, I set up an anonymous email account using a burner phone. No personal details, no link to me whatsoever. If Jake tried to figure out who'd sent it, he'd hit a wall so hard it'd knock the smug right out of his smile. The next step was deciding who to send it to. I made a list. The company's CFO, the head of HRA, couple of high-value clients I knew Jake had billed twice, and, just for good measure, the local business journal's investigative reporter. But here's the tricky part. If I sent it too early, management would quietly sweep it under the rug. If I sent it too late, he might already have the promotion locked in. I needed the timing to be surgical, right when he was standing at the peak, ready to take his little victory lap. That way, when he fell, the drop would be spectacular. While I waited, I kept tabs on the office through Denise and Carla. They told me Jake had been strutting around more than usual, acting like he already had the new title. Long lunches, bragging about big plans for the department, and get this. He'd been talking about buying a boat. A boat. Oh, I was going to sink that ship before it ever left the dock. One evening, Denise called me. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. Apparently, Jake had been working late and accidentally left his office door unlocked. The janitor found a stack of printed invoices sitting right on his desk, including one for a client, that hadn't been active in 6 months. Even better, that invoice had been paid. I asked Denise if she could get me a copy. She hesitated, not because she didn't want to help, but because she knew it was risky. But the next day, she sent me a photo, clear as day, the date, the dollar amount, and the fact that the client account was inactive. It was like the cherry on top of a very incriminating sundae. By the time the week of the promotion party rolled around, my packet was ready. I put together a neatly organized folder, digital and physical, with a cover letter written as if from a concerned employee. No emotion, no personal vendetta, just facts. I even included an index page. Exhibit A, Evidence of Duplicate Billing Practices, 2019-2025. Exhibit B, Vendor Cost Inflation, 2022-2024. Exhibit C, Client Misrepresentation and False Reporting. Multiple accounts. The night before the event, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the folder. This was it. Months of anger, humiliation, and quiet planning, all leading to tomorrow. Jake thought he'd won. Tomorrow, he'd find out just how wrong he was. The morning of the party felt almost too normal. I got up, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. But on my second cup, I opened my anonymous email account and looked at the drafts folder. Inside were 5 carefully crafted messages, each with the evidence packet attached, each addressed to a different person on my list. Each one written with the same polite, clinical tone. I believe this information is relevant to your company's ethical and legal compliance. Please review the attached documentation. No signature, no identifying marks, just facts. Deadly facts. I waited until 11:55 a.m. The party was scheduled for noon in the big conference hall at the downtown office. By 12:05, Jake would be at the podium, soaking up applause. That was my window. At exactly 11:56, I clicked Send All. I didn't slam the button. I didn't hesitate. I just sent them. Then I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and sat back in my chair. Somewhere across town, a dozen inboxes lit up at once. From what Denise told me later, the party started like any other corporate celebration. Balloons in company colors, a buffet of mini sandwiches and cupcakes, one of those big plastic tubs filled with ice and cheap champagne bottles. Jake was there, working the room like a politician, shaking hands, laughing too loud, making sure every eye was on him. At 12:07, the CFO's assistant leaned in and whispered something in her ear. The CFO frowned, glanced at her phone, then excused herself from the table. At 12:09, the head of HR got a call. She stepped out too. By 12:12, 2 major clients had sent urgent, call me now messages to the CEO. Jake didn't notice. He was too busy standing near the podium, telling some exaggerated story about a $1 million save he'd made last quarter. But the room noticed. Little ripples started spreading, people whispering, glancing at their phones, frowning at the screens. At 12:15, the CEO walked in, not smiling, not clapping. He went straight to Jake. Denise said she couldn't hear every word, but she caught enough. Step outside, now. Jake laughed at first, like it was some kind of joke, but the CEO didn't laugh back. The two of them walked out of the conference hall. A minute later, HR followed, then the CFO. The murmurs in the room turned into open speculation. What's going on? Did something happen? I just got an email from... Wait, what is this? Denise told me she saw Jake come back about 10 minutes later, but he wasn't strutting anymore. He looked pale, like all the blood had drained from his face. He grabbed his jacket off the back of a chair, avoided eye contact with everyone, and headed straight for the elevator. By 12:45, the party was over. No speeches, no champagne toast. Just a half-eaten tray of cupcakes and a room full of confused employees. That afternoon, Jake's LinkedIn went quiet. The man who posted 3 times a day about leadership and growth didn't post at all. By the next morning, his profile headline had changed. It no longer said Senior Account Director. Now it just said, Looking for new opportunities. Denise called me that night. They escorted him out, she said. Laptop, phone, everything. They told the staff it was a confidential HR matter, but, well, half the office saw the emails. I smiled into the phone. Guess the promotion didn't go through, huh? She laughed. Oh, honey, he's not getting promoted anywhere anytime soon. Jake being fired was satisfying, but satisfying wasn't enough. Because here's the thing, People forget. A few months go by, the gossip fades, and someone like Jake pops up in another cushy job pretending nothing ever happened. I couldn't let that happen. Not with him. Not after what he did to me. I didn't want whispers in break rooms. I wanted headlines. I wanted his name tied so tightly to his mess that every Google search for Jake Wallace came with a flashing neon warning sign. Do not hire. That's where my phase 2 came in. Remember that investigative reporter I had on my list? The one at the Dallas Business Journal who'd exposed that accounting scandal a few years back? Well, she had a reputation for loving a good corporate fraud story, and my little folder of evidence was basically a buffet. I sent her an email from my burner account. Subject: Potential lead, corporate billing fraud. Body: I have documentation of a marketing executive in Dallas who engaged in double billing, client misrepresentation, and possible vendor fraud. The company quietly terminated him this week. The attached files contain full evidence. Interested? I hit send. The next morning, she replied, "This is solid. Can we talk?" Totally off the record. We arranged a call. Me using a voice masking app, of course. She didn't need to know my name. She just needed the facts. We talked for 30 minutes. I gave her the broad strokes. The inflated vendor invoices, the duplicate client billing, the fake results he'd reported to get bonuses. I even pointed her toward 2 former clients who'd been overcharged. People who had no idea, until I told them. By the end of the call, she sounded practically giddy. "This is great," she said. "Give me a week." And I knew enough about journalism to know, if a reporter says, "Give me a week," they're about to light a match. While she worked her angle, I started on mine. I created a LinkedIn account. Under a fake name, nothing suspicious, just a generic profile pic and a title like marketing consultant. Then I began quietly posting cautionary content, stories about unethical billing practices, tips for clients to protect themselves, all of it vague, but eerily similar to what Jake had been doing. People started connecting the dots. Meanwhile, Denise and Carla were feeding me little updates from the office grapevine. Jake had been calling former coworkers trying to set the record straight. But apparently, every time he told his version, someone would say, that's not what I heard," and the conversation would die. He was already losing control of the narrative. 1 week later, the reporter's article dropped. Headline: Local marketing executive fired over alleged billing scheme. Former clients claim overcharges. The article was brutal. It didn't use Jake's full name, just a former senior account director at a Dallas-based marketing firm. But they included enough details, his job title, his recent award, his department, that anyone who knew him could figure it out instantly. And here's the best part. The story got picked up by other outlets. Small local business, blogs, a marketing trade newsletter, even a podcast that covers corporate drama did a 15-minute segment on it. Jake wasn't just unemployed anymore. He was a story. 2 days later, his LinkedIn was gone completely. No profile, no posts. Just vanished. That's when I knew I'd hit him where it really hurt. His ego. The man lived for online validation. And now, his digital crown had been ripped right off his head. But here's the thing. I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. Because as the story spread, I started getting messages. From strangers. People who'd worked with Jake years ago. People he'd scammed, lied to, or thrown under the bus, and they all said the same thing. "Thank you for finally exposing him." Jake thought he could bury what he'd done. But I was just getting started, because there was one more place I could hit him, somewhere he'd never expect. The thing about taking someone down at work is, it only covers one piece of their life. Sure, Jake's career was in flames, but I knew him well enough to know he'd try to pivot. He'd charm his way into some other job, or reinvent himself as a consultant, or start posting obnoxious motivational quotes online like nothing had happened. And that's when I realized I couldn't let him have a fresh start anywhere, not even in his personal life. The first step was social media. See, Jake loved 2 things: impressing women, showing off for his friends. He was on every platform: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. even TikTok. His feed was basically a highlight reel of Jake being successful. Cocktail bars, rooftop selfies, expensive-looking dinners that I knew were probably comped from clients. I started small. From my fake account, I began commenting under his posts. Harmless at first, just a, "Isn't this from last year?" under one of his new vacation pics. Or, "Didn't the company pay for this dinner?" Nothing that broke the rules. Just enough to make people wonder. Next, I tapped into something I'd learned back when we were dating. Jake's friend group was loyal until embarrassed. They'd defend him to strangers, but the moment they felt like he was making them look bad, they'd pull back. They were image conscious, just like him. So I made sure they were embarrassed. One Friday night, Jake was tagged in a photo at a popular Dallas whiskey bar. The post wasn't even his. It was from a friend. From my burner, I commented, "Is this the guy from that article about corporate fraud?" Within hours, the thread blew up. Some defended him. Others admitted they'd heard something about that story. By the next day, the tag was removed, and so was Jake's name from the caption. Then came the dating apps. Jake was on them all: Bumble, Hinge, Tinder. And oh, he loved to brag about how in demand he was. So I created profiles using fake names and photos that looked like the kind of women he swiped right on. When we matched, I'd play along for a few messages. Then casually drop, "Hey, aren't you the guy who got fired for scamming clients?" Sometimes I'd link the article. Sometimes I'd just ghost after saying it, letting the doubt fester. Within a week, Jake's dating life turned into a minefield. Denise even told me that one of his situationships ended abruptly when she found the news story. Apparently, she didn't want to be seen with a con artist. But my favorite move came from an idea Carla had. "Why don't you hit the charity angle?" she suggested. Jake had been on the volunteer board of a local nonprofit. Mostly for the PR, I reached out to one of their members anonymously, forwarding the article and saying, "You might want to know this about one of your board members." 2 weeks. Later, Jake's name disappeared from their website. By now, Jake wasn't just unemployed. He was socially radioactive. No job, no board position, dates bailing on him, friends quietly distancing themselves. Every little kingdom he'd built around himself was crumbling. But the thing is, I still wasn't done. Because while ruining his reputation was great, there was one more thing I could take from him. Something he valued even more than his image. Jake could survive embarrassment. He could survive gossip. But if there was one thing he couldn't survive, it was being broke. Money was his oxygen. It's how he kept up the image, the dinners, the clothes, the just got back from Miami weekends. Without it, Jake wasn't Jake. The thing is, I knew all his money streams. See, Jake didn't live on his salary alone. He had side hustles, little consulting gigs with small businesses who didn't know any better, kickbacks from vendors, and a very cozy arrangement with one particular marketing agency that liked under-the-table work. I decided it was time to choke those off, one by one. First target, the boutique fitness studio. Jake had helped them brand their business a year earlier, and in exchange, they paid him a monthly retainer for marketing advice. From my anonymous account, I sent them an email. Thought you'd want to know who's representing your brand. Here's a recent article about your consultant. Do your clients know you work with someone accused of corporate fraud? I attached the link. No commentary, just the facts. 2 weeks later, his retainer stopped. Second target, the restaurant group. Jake had a silent partner deal with them. Basically, they let him host networking dinners in exchange for positive social media buzz, so I left a few anonymous reviews online. Nothing defamatory, just curious questions like, why is this place associated with that marketing guy in the news? And because restaurant owners are terrified of bad press, Jake suddenly found himself uninvited from his own events. Third, target the vendor kickbacks. This one was my favorite. I knew the vendor's main contact, a guy named Rick who thought he was untouchable. I also knew Rick's company had a strict ethics clause in their contracts, so I sent them screenshots. Emails between Jake and Rick discussing splitting the overage on an inflated invoice. Emails Jake had stupidly left in his sent folder. back when I still worked there. Within days, Rick was under internal review, and Jake lost another easy cash stream. By now, Denise was texting me updates like they were baseball scores. Lost his retainer. That's $2K a month gone. Vendor deal dead. Bye-bye easy money. No more free dinners. Guess he's paying for his own cocktails now. But I wasn't done, because there was still one big fish left, his consulting gig with that shady marketing agency. They operated in the gray area between legal and not. If they thought Jake was radioactive, they'd drop him faster than a bad stock. I crafted a very careful, very formal email. As a concerned member of the local business community, I think you should be aware that one of your consultants has been recently linked to unethical billing practices. Multiple articles have been published. I've attached the links for your review. 3 days later, Jake's name was removed from their Our Team page. And just like that, Jake's income dried up. No salary, no side hustles, no under-the-table cash. He was forced to sell his luxury SUV, the same one he used to brag about on Instagram, and move out of his high-rise apartment into a cheaper place in the suburbs. But here's the thing. The money was just the beginning, because next, I was going after something priceless. His peace of mind. By now, Jake's money was gone. His reputation was in ruins. But I wanted more than that. I wanted him to feel it. Every single day. I didn't want him just struggling. I wanted him waking up at 3 a.m., wondering who was still talking about him. I wanted every shadow to look like me, every phone notification to make his stomach drop. The trick was simple. Never let him know I was the one doing it. Let his imagination do the heavy lifting. It started small. I mailed him an unmarked envelope with nothing inside but a printed screenshot of that news article about his firing. No return address. The next week, I mailed a different clipping, an online review that hinted at his past behavior. No note, no threats. Just enough to remind him that his mess was still out there. Then I moved to public spaces. Through Denise, I found out where he'd started working out, some cheap, 24-hour gym in the suburbs. Every so often, I'd have someone, never me, park near his car and leave a folded copy of the Dallas Business Journal on his windshield. Same article, circled in red. Online, I kept it subtle. From burner accounts, I'd like his old Instagram. Photos at weird hours of the night. Or I'd follow him on Twitter, then unfollow 2 days later. Tiny things that, alone, mean nothing. But stacked together, they start to feel like a pattern. I also knew his new neighborhood. Small, quiet streets where everyone notices everything. So I posted a few community watch updates on the local Facebook group. Anyone else see that guy in the silver sedan circling our block? He's been around a lot lately. Never mentioned his name. But if you lived there, you'd start looking at every car twice. And if you were the guy in the silver sedan, you'd start wondering if people were talking about you. Carla had the best idea, though. We created a fake Gmail address, something boring like Dallas Recruitment Team, and sent him a job opportunity email. It sounded legitimate at first, until the very bottom of the message, where it said, "Of course, we'll need to verify there are no outstanding ethics complaints against you. No follow-up." Just that one little sentence. Denise said he'd been jumpy lately, asking random co-workers if they'd heard anything, looking over his shoulder more than usual. The paranoia was setting in. And here's the beautiful thing. When someone feels hunted, they start making mistakes. And Jake? He was about to make his biggest one yet. By now, Jake was unraveling. He wasn't just losing money or friends, he was losing control. And when people like Jake lose control, they don't fade quietly. They explode. Denise had been feeding me updates from her very reliable accidental run-ins with him. She said his hands shook when he tried to unlock his car. He'd stop mid-sentence during conversations, scanning the room like he'd heard something, and he'd started drinking more. Not the fun, social kind. The 3 whiskey sours at lunch kind. The opportunity came one Friday evening at the Copper Fox, a downtown Dallas bar Jake loved. It was networking night, the kind of place he used to own the room. But this time, he wasn't the golden boy. I wasn't there in person, of course. No, I had eyes. Denise was in the crowd pretending to accidentally bump into old coworkers. Her job was simple: watch and record if anything happened. And oh, it happened. Jake was mid-conversation with a small group, 2 guys in sports coats and a woman in a sharp blue dress. Out of nowhere, he slammed his drink down so hard the ice rattled. "Who's been talking about me?" he barked. The group froze. Someone laughed nervously. He leaned in closer, voice rising. "Don't play dumb. I know someone's been feeding lies to people. I see the looks. I see the whispers." "You think I don't know?" Denise said. The entire bar went dead silent for a second. Then the whispers started. Not the ones in his head this time, but real ones. Phones came out. A couple of people recorded. He stormed out, but not before shoving past a guy near the door, knocking his drink to the floor. By the next morning, 2 short, blurry videos were on Facebook and TikTok. The captions weren't kind. "Local scammer losing it in public." "This guy's not okay." Within 24 hours, one clip had over 12,000 views. Now here's the part I really loved. Jake tried to spin it, posted on his Instagram story, about dealing with harassment and being targeted by jealous people. But here's the problem. When you look unhinged on video, no amount of hashtags is going to save you. Music shifts to a sly, confident note. His meltdown had done my work for me. People were already turning away. Potential employers? Gone. Dating prospects? Scared off. Even some of his old friends stopped responding to his texts, and with the walls closing in, Jake made a desperate move, one that would finally let me take the last thing he had left. I always knew it would happen eventually. When you push someone far enough, they either disappear or they come looking for you. Jake? He wasn't the disappearing type. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I saw him. I'd just stepped out of Common Grounds, my favorite coffee shop in Deep Ellum, holding an iced vanilla latte and scrolling through my phone. And there he was, leaning against the hood of a dented silver sedan, the same one he'd downgraded to after losing the SUV. "Hey," he called out, his voice tight. "Got a minute?" I could have ignored him. I could have walked right past like I didn't hear. But instead, I smiled. "Sure, Jake. Long time no see." He stepped closer, and I could smell the faint mix of cheap cologne and coffee on his breath. "I know it's you," he said, eyes locked on mine. "All of it. The emails, the calls, the reviews. It's you." I tilted my head, keeping my voice calm. "Jake, that's a pretty big accusation. You sure you want to say that in public?" His jaw flexed. "You ruined my life." I sipped my latte, letting the silence stretch just long enough for him to fidget. "Jake, you ruined your life. I just didn't get in the way while it happened." That's when he made his mistake. He stepped in too close. Close enough that a couple sitting nearby turned their heads. His voice rose, not quite shouting, but enough to draw attention. "I swear if you don't stop, I'll—" "Excuse me?" I said loudly, taking a step back. Now everyone nearby was watching. I pulled my phone out and hit record. "You're threatening me now? In front of witnesses?" His face paled. "I didn't..." But it was too late. The couple at the table had their phones out too. A barista stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. "Is everything okay? Here?" she asked, looking straight at me. I put on my calmest voice. "Yeah, I think this gentleman was just leaving. And here's the beautiful thing. He had to leave, because if he stayed, he risked being the subject of yet another viral video. And that? He couldn't afford." Music shifts to a low, cunning tone. Later that night, I sent him one final text from a burner number. "Stay away from me. Last warning. No name, no explanation. Just enough to let him know I wasn't scared, and if I wasn't..." Scared. He should be. Because now there was only one move left. The final play. The part that would make sure Jake never recovered. After that coffee shop incident, Jake stayed quiet. No late-night texts, no weird accidental run-ins, just silence. And that silence told me something important. He was regrouping. People, like Jake, don't give up. They look for cracks in the wall, little openings to crawl back into the life they think they deserve. and I knew exactly where he'd try to crawl. 2 weeks later, Denise texted me, "You're gonna love this. He's trying to get hired at a boutique firm in Uptown. They don't know about his history." Of course they didn't. Why would they? Jake's meltdown videos had lost momentum online, and his name wasn't exactly famous. Yet. So I built my case. Remember all those screenshots, client complaints, double billing invoices I'd kept? I bundled them neatly, labeled, time-stamped, and paired with links to those TikTok meltdown videos. Then I wrote a polite, anonymous email to the firm's HR department. "You might want to be aware of this before making any hiring decisions. Attach the file." Sent it. Waited. 2 days later, Denise had an update. Apparently, Jake had been sitting in their glass-walled conference room for a final interview when the hiring manager stepped out to grab something. A few minutes later, 2 security guards walked in and asked him to leave. No explanation, no chance to argue. Just a slow, humiliating walk past the reception desk while the office staff pretended not to stare. But I wasn't done. The very same email I sent to HR, I also sent it to 3 industry-wide listservs, the kind of email threads where everyone in marketing talks about everything. By the end of the week, Jake's name was dirt in every major firm from Dallas to Austin, and just like that, his last open door slammed shut. No callbacks, no interviews, no future in the only industry he'd ever known. He could still find work, sure, maybe bussing, tables or stocking shelves. But Jake, the rising star, he was gone. I thought that would be the end. I thought I'd finally be able to close this chapter. But then, something landed in my inbox. Something that made me realize Jake's fall wasn't over yet. It was a rainy Thursday night when I got the email. No subject line, no signature, just 2 words. "You won." For a second, I thought it was spam. But then I saw the address. Not Jake's main one, but the personal Gmail he'd used back when we were still friendly. There was no attachment, no threats. Just those 2 words. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Denise with the caption, "Guess he's finally done." She wrote back almost instantly, "You haven't heard?" That's when she told me. Apparently, after the boutique firm rejection, Jake bounced between a few dead-end jobs. None lasted more than a couple weeks. Word about him had spread further than I thought. Even some bars wouldn't hire him once they Googled his name. He'd sold his car, moved into a dingy studio near the highway, stopped posting on social media entirely, and then a rumor. Denise said someone from our old office had spotted him outside a pawn shop looking thinner, older, and, for the first time, small. Not angry, not arrogant, just small. I sat there staring at that email for a long time. I'd gotten what I wanted. Every single thing I'd planned had worked. And now, he was broken. But here's the thing about revenge. No one tells you what happens after. The moment you get everything you set out for, it feels good. It feels damn good. But then, it's just quiet. I didn't reply to his email. I didn't send one last jab or one last threat. I just dragged it into a folder labeled "Done" and closed my laptop. Because the truth is, he was right. I did win, and I didn't need to say it. He already knew.